I work with Dr. Miller, and we do some research with terror management theory. And so he's letting me come in to guest lecture. I have to tell you, my colleague Jules is here. She's going to be doing some recording, and this is kind of a cool thing, because they're going to send some of this video away for like a teaching competition. So we're not going to be recording you guys, but Jules will be recording the lecture. And so if you see her get up in the middle of the lecture, that's where she's going. She's not, yeah, come on in. And so we'll be talking about terror management theory. Did he assign you guys a reading about terror management theory? Okay, great. And so I've taught the persuasion class. I teach it in the summer, and I've done some research with Dr. Miller in regards to terror management theory. And so I've taught this lecture a couple times, and before we get going, I assume from the reading you guys have touched on terror management theory a little bit. And you know, it's always kind of an interesting theory to talk about. It's a little bit provocative. It touches on concepts of life and death, spirituality, culture, conflict. And so it can be kind of a controversial, framework to talk about. And so as we talk about it today, I think it's important that we look at terror management theory like analytically, and in this case, the context of this class is students of persuasion. Right? So I'm not telling you to accept the premises or reject them. I'm just going to tell you about the theory. You can decide that on your own, and some research that's been done on it. And so without further ado, we'll kind of dive in. Terror management theory is based in the work, or premised in the work, of a guy named Ernest Becker. And Ernest Becker was a cultural anthropologist, and so he studied different cultures. And Becker, what he found was, when he started his research, he wanted to look at all of the great go ahead, come on in, all of the great civilizations and cultures of antiquity, like ancient Egypt, Rome, the Greeks. And Becker wanted to figure out, go ahead, come on through. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. Becker wanted to figure out what these great civilizations had in common. And what he found is that they were quite different in many ways, but they shared one thing in common, which was that each civilization had a very complex cultural system for dealing with death and the afterlife. And so what Becker, his thesis, kind of after reviewing all of this information about all these societies from antiquity, he came up with this argument, and his argument was this, that, come on in. Do we have enough chairs in here? I got a floater up here. Yeah, so Becker's argument was, after reviewing all of these ancient civilizations, was that they shared this one thing, and this one thing was that they had these complex cultural systems designed to deal with the concept of death, and this led Becker to propose an argument, and his argument was this, that death, the end of human life, is a psychological problem for humans. For one reason, because humans have developed these very advanced cognitive skills, the gray matter in our brain, and it allows us to project ourself into the future. So in other words, I can imagine what my life will be like in 10 years, or 20 years, or 40 years. And what that means is, unfortunately, that human beings can look far enough down the road to figure out that there's going to be a time where our existence ends. And this clashes with our evolutionary drive to survive. In other words, the modern human is, according to the theory, is the product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And so we have these two drives, one to survive, but also on the other hand, we have a cognition that tells us we're not going to survive. And these two ideas clash, and they create dissonance. As Dr. Miller talked to you guys about dissonance theory, it creates dissonance. And even when you think about terror management theory, you talk about it, a lot of times people will say to me, I don't like thinking about this. And I don't like thinking about it either. It's a theory, but it creates this kind of uncomfortable feeling. And Becker argued that the solution to this dilemma, to resolve this uncomfortable, what is sometimes called aversive, which is unpleasant or dissonant causing cognitions, is to create meaning in our lives, to make our lives more meaningful. And Becker's argument was the way in which humans brought meaning into their lives is through cultural systems. In fact, Becker's argument is that human culture is a symbolic defense against the existential terror of death awareness, being aware that we're not going to live forever, that we're mortal. And again, he examined cultures of antiquity, older cultures. And so I've just provided some cultural examples here from antiquity. And so let's define culture. Like, culture's a term you hear all the time, right? We got to change the culture here. There's culture wars. We're always talking about culture, but I don't know if anyone ever defines it, so I'll just give you guys a quick and easy definition. You could think of culture as just a system of knowledge. It's just a system of knowledge that allows us to relate to other people, lets us know where we stand, lets us know what food to eat, what's attractive. And so Becker went and examined, and his claim is that these systems of knowledge help us overcome the fear of death. So here's a cave painting. This is like an ancient cave painting. It's however many years old, 20,000 years or something like that. But the artist of the painting lives forever, as long as the painting lives. We're still looking at it. We're looking at it on a PowerPoint slide now. We have these elaborate customs to celebrate our fallen and our leaders. We have cultural items that tell us what is attractive or not, fairly or unfairly. Have you guys ever seen a picture like this before? You guys know what this is, like an anthropology class or something like that? It's like an old fertility goddess. It's a statue of a fertility goddess from like our ancient hunting and gathering ancestors. Does anyone know, why would you think that statues of a fertility goddess for hunting and gathering people would be heavy set like this? Like, what do you think the purpose of that is? What does it say?
That they're healthy?
That they're healthy. Yeah, who said that? Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, that they're healthy. And if you think about, if you're like a caveman and a cavewoman and you live 30 years and you're fighting for food and resources, having someone who's big is a sign of success of the tribe. That's one interpretation. We build great temples, symbolic temples where we hold rituals. And those temples survive beyond us, and as part of, being a part of that temple, we live on in a way too, and we build statues and icons to celebrate our cherished cultural values. Now, Becker looked at all this, and then he looked at the modern condition, and he argued that really not much has changed. In other words, we still have artists that make works of art that are supposed to transcend time and encourage thinking, that we build statues to celebrate our fallen leaders and heroes, that we have cultural artifacts that rightly or wrongly, fairly or unfairly, prescribe standards of beauty. Whether it's fair or not, I don't know, but this is a lot different than the fertility goddess, right? That we build great temples and we build statues to represent our values, things that we value as a culture. And so Becker said, really, we have better technology. We have PowerPoints, we have, phones we can watch movies on. We can stream things, we have the internet, but really just this ultimate underlying condition that we're mortal and we know that we're not going to live forever has not changed very much over time. Now, in 1986, the authors of terror management theory read Becker's work. They were inspired by Becker's work, and they proposed a formal theory. It's a theory from psychology. And the premise of the theory is this: that when you make someone aware of their death, their mortality salient is the term. Have you guys, has Dr. Miller talked about vested interest yet? Okay, so you guys are familiar with salience, right? Salience just means something pops. You can, if everyone in the room is wearing a white shirt and one person is wearing a red shirt is salient. And so in the language of terror management theory, mortality salience means when you make someone aware of their death, you make their mortality salient, elicits something called existential anxiety. And that's anxiety about existence, is what it means. Anxiety about existence. That if you make mortality salient, people will feel existential anxiety, and that will motivate them to engage in a number of behaviors designed to buffer that anxiety. So it's like a hydraulic theory. You push one hydraulic, it just pushes the other part. And central to the terror management theory is this idea of a cultural worldview. So they kind of tighten the focus of the definition from Becker. And here's how they define cultural worldview. It's a socially shared conceptions of reality that give life order and stability, feelings of permanence, and standards of value. And so even though we feel like our cultural worldviews, which could include your religious worldview, your political ideology, is anyone going to Dallas on Saturday? Okay, there's going to be a cultural exhibition there, like half the stadium's red, half the stadium is orange, right? So when they say Texas, you yell something, and when we say boomer, they say something or whatever. And so that people's cultural worldview, because they're stable and because they provide us with a feeling of safety, they buffer existential anxiety. It's a key part of the framework.